Hello again. Today we're going to be talking about order of operations, or as most of you know it, PEMDAS. So the goal of this is to use this order to be able to evaluate expressions involving integers and frankly other numbers too. So just as a reminder, PEMDAS stands for parentheses, exponents, multiply, divide, add, and subtract, which is the order in which you complete problems like this. Honestly, I've been seeing this blow up all over social media where people are fighting about problems like these. Just to prove it, I saved some over here, especially this 8 divided by 2 times 2 plus 2, 1. So if you ever come across these on social media, you should be able to be the expert and explain to everybody else why they're doing the problems wrong. So with that said, I'm just going to get started with some problems and jump right in. Okay, number one, I wrote it in two different ways. One has parentheses, one doesn't, just to show you, how you would complete these problems differently based on how they look. Parentheses just group things together, always. Okay, this is true whether it's an expression with just numbers. It's true whether there's variables and equations. All parentheses do is group things together. Okay, so this is grouping the -3 plus -8 together, which means you should just be adding those things together, which is why we do it first, because this addition won't apply to this 2 over here. So if you have parentheses, you would do whatever's inside of them first. So this is step 1. -3 plus -8. We're going to go back to our last lesson and say if you're $3 in debt, and then you add $8 more to your debt, how much in debt are you? And, well, first of all, that you are still in debt. And now you're in debt $11. And then you would take that and divide it by 2, and you could evaluate that from there. Okay, but these parentheses have to come first. I'm not going to kind of solve this because we're talking about integers for now, and that would be a decimal or fraction. Okay, versus this problem, very similar, except there are no parentheses, which means we kind of don't have to look at this blue box here. There are no exponents, so we can ignore the purple box. Now we want to multiply or divide before we add or subtract. So we actually would then complete this division first. So what is -8 divided by 2? Well, you have -$8. You share it with 2 people. Now everybody's in debt $4. Okay, then you could do the addition. This didn't change because I haven't done anything to it, but -3 plus -4. You're $3 in debt. You add $4 to your debt. You're now $7 in debt. Okay, so whether there's parentheses or no parentheses, you're still following this order. But if there are parentheses, you have to start with those. I'm going to leave number 2 for you to try on your own because it's very similar. Number 3. One thing I wanted to point out here is what this notation means. And this just means to multiply. Anytime you put things in parentheses next to each other, that means multiplication. So oftentimes we stopped using the x as multiplication in higher level math because we often use x as a variable. So we have a couple different notations. You might just see things in parentheses, or you might see like this dot a little bit later on, but those both mean multiplication. So then in PEMDAS, multiplication comes before addition and subtraction. So you would multiply these guys as your first step. 3 times 5 is 15. What's 4 minus 15? Well, you have $4 in your bank, and then you owe the bank $15, or they take away $15. So now you're in debt, but you're in debt $11. Okay, next one. You'll see a fraction here, and that often intimidates people. But what I want you to know from this problem is that a fraction like this, it's just division. You're just dividing those numbers. So although this is a fraction, it really says 24 divided by 4 minus 10. Okay, so with that said, we are going to do the division first, except we don't have anything to divide by yet. So, in reality, this is like grouped together, even though the parentheses aren't there, kind of like invisible parentheses. We would need something to divide by, so we'd have to subtract those first. So, 4 minus 10, you have $4. You lose $10. Now you're in debt $6. But then we would go ahead and perform the division before we added things together, which actually kind of just makes sense in this problem. So you have 24 cookies, you share them with 6 friends, everyone's going to get 4 cookies, except it's negative, so your answer is going to be 4 plus -4. And I just want to remind you from the last video, 4 plus -4 means the exact same thing as 4 minus 4. Either way, subtraction or adding a negative means to take away. Okay, so 4 minus 4 is a little bit easier to answer. That gives us 0. Okay, or you're $4 in debt, but then you lose $4. Well, now you have no dollars. Okay, it means the exact same thing. I'm actually going to leave 5 for you to try on your own as well, but I am going to talk through a few more. Exponents haven't come up yet, but remember in our PEMDAS, our order of operations, exponents come second. Okay, so if there are parentheses, you do that first. So like in this problem, we would do 2 plus 1 first because they're inside parentheses, and then we would evaluate exponents. So 2 plus 1 is 3. So you then have 3 squared. Remember this dot again means multiplication. LTPLY, there we go. And then you're going to multiply it by 2 to the third power. Now you don't really need these parentheses anymore because you've already completed that operation. So 3 squared means the same as 3 squared without parentheses. Okay, just as a reminder, an exponent, and I'm going to write this down, an exponent, and you should write this down too, is repeated multiplication. So when it says 3 to the second power, or 3 squared, or 3 with the little 2, that means an exponent. That means you multiply 3, the base, 2 times. So this really means 3 times 3. Okay, 2 to the third, or 2 to the third power, 2 with an exponent of 3, the base is 2. The exponent tells you how many times to multiply that. So this would be 2 times 2 times 2, 3 times. Okay, so just to summarize that, the exponent tells you how many times to multiply. I know this is kind of long, but bear with me. So how many times to multiply the base of the exponent? Okay, and back to our PEMDAS problem, these two things are being multiplied together. So really you would do 3 times 3 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is a lot. So I'm going to chunk this up. 3 times 3 is 9. 2 times 2 is 4 times 2 is 8. So 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. What's 9 times 8? Would be 72 as my final answer. Okay, and I want to compare that to this problem where I take out the parentheses because you do something different. Since this is grouped together, you did the parentheses first. Okay, but in this problem, there are no parentheses, so you're actually going to do the exponent guys first. You're going to evaluate the exponents. So 2 would stay the same this time. Now you're going to do 1 squared, which is 1 times 1. 1 times 1 is just 1. And you're going to multiply that by 2 to the third, which 2 to the third is 2 times 2 times 2, which we already know is 8. Okay, then after you do that, well, multiplication comes before addition. So you're going to do 1 times 8 next. So it's going to be 2 times 1 times 8 is 8. And then finally do the addition. 2 plus 8 is 10. Okay, so you get a different answer for these two problems because of order of operations. Parentheses come before exponents. I'm going to do one more and leave number 8 for you guys to do on your own. There's a lot going on here. There's a lot of steps, but I highly encourage you to take any math problem in chunks. Do one part at a time like I have been this whole time. So what am I going to do first? Well, we know that multiplication and division come first, and I see both of those right here. This problem's pretty tricky, so bear with me. Okay, now multiplication and division are essentially the same thing, but like inverses of each other. Okay, so you'll notice in this graphic here, they're the same color, just like addition and subtraction are the same color, because they're essentially the same thing, but going the opposite direction. Okay, so multiplication and division would come before addition and subtraction, but in terms of deciding should I multiply or divide first, you always work from left to right. It doesn't really matter at that point which one, because they are essentially the same thing. Same thing with addition and subtraction. If you have both of them, you're always just going to then move from left to right in the problem. Okay, so going this way on your problem, which I'll draw the arrow down here as well. Okay, so in the multiplication division, you're going to start with whatever's on the left and move your way right. But we want to do the division and the multiplication first. So really good wrong answer would be just to go ahead and add these first and then divide and then multiply. But that is not what you want to do here. So let's do what we do want to do here, which is go from left to right. So we're going to do the division first. You're going to take -1 and divide it by 2. This isn't going to be pretty, but what's -1 divided by 2? It's like taking one thing dividing in 2 parts. So it's actually a half or 0.5. But it's negative, so it's going to be -0.5. Okay. I gave you decimals or fractions as well, so that makes it extra tricky. Okay, so this is what we do first because it's division. Okay, and we're moving left to right. I'm going to rewrite the rest of the problem because I'm only doing one step at a time. Okay, just did the blue part first. Okay, next you would again continue to move left to right because we have multiplication, and you'd multiply these two together. Okay, so I have -0.5 times 5. I'm going to rewrite the rest of the problem because we're not doing anything with that yet. We're just multiplying these two guys. So you have 0.5 5 times. So that's 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5 plus 0.5, which gives us 2.5. But then it's a negative times a positive, so it's going to be -2.5. Okay. Last but not least, you can then do the subtraction because you've taken care of the division and multiplication. So I have -3 minus -2.5, and I threw this in here because I want you to remember what happens when you subtract a negative. I'm going to actually write down here because I'm running out of room. Remember that when you subtract a negative, it's the same thing as adding that together. So really what you have is -3 plus 2.5. Okay. Again, you were subtracting a negative here. So -3 plus 2.5 is like you're $3 in debt, but then you earn $2.50. You're not quite out of debt yet, but you're so close. You're still going to be in debt like 50 cents. I know that that was tricky because I threw in decimals and like there was a complex order of operations there, which is why I wanted to walk through that. But if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. And I'm going to leave this guy for you to try on your own as well. And if you have any questions, make sure to insert them or ask me, and have a great rest of your day.